we're living through a moment of profound uncertainty. And for immigrant communities, that uncertainty it's not abstract. There is a lot of chronic stress that is exacerbating already existing health disparities for this community, and that's happening on their daily life.
Hello, everyone. I'm Pamela Brewer, welcoming you back to this edition of M.E.S.H. Today, I have with me Dr. Iris Cardenas. She is an assistant professor at the University of Maryland School of Social Work and a faculty associate at the Center for Behavioral Health and Well-Being. Iris, welcome to M.E.S.H.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here with you.
Now, we are going to be talking about stress. So hopefully it won't be too stressful. But you heard me indicate that you are working with University of Maryland School of Social Work as an assistant professor. And I also said that you were with the Center for Behavioral Health and Well-Being. Is that also with the University of Maryland School of Social Work?
Yes, it is a center within the School of Social Work at UMB.
Okay, I didn't realize that. So is that a new center? Is that just recently been formed?
It used to be a lab, so it was a little more informal and has recently become a center, yes.
Okay, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, let's start with, I think what's probably on everybody's mind in one way, shape, or form is stress.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that we are all under chronic stress, regardless of what community we identify with. I would say that we all are feeling like we're riding a roller coaster and getting maybe more comfortable with the screams and not comfortable in a good way. But just sort of the screams of the chaos. This is all my language, and you may or may not agree, but let's start with one of your interests, which is reducing social and health disparities within the immigrant community.
Yeah.
How on earth do you do that in today's world? That's actually question number 2. Question number 1, what do you mean when you want to say you want to reduce social and health disparities within the Latinx community? What does that mean?
Yeah, I think that so to reduce the disparity, right, is to reduce the health outcomes and the social outcomes that we see that differ from communities of color and immigrant communities when we compare it to non-immigrant communities and communities of color, right? So we do know that immigrant communities of color, they tend to have poor health outcomes, right? Lower educational levels, their economical sustainability is more precarious, right, financially. So those are all the determinants of health that we're trying to address. What is it that we're trying to do by that? The disparity is leveling the playing field, right? So now your question was, I think, how do we do that?
Yeah, I think that's a big question.
That is a big question, and I'm gonna try to answer it as much as I'm able to. But I think that in order to do that, this is a layered response because it's a layered problem, right? So specifically for the immigrant community, right?
Yes.
So, and it's similar to communities of color, I will say.
Absolutely.
Right? So if we think about their structural barriers to accessing care, right? There's structural barriers with immigrant communities. There is a lack of language access, right? So services that either are fluent and speak their own languages, lack of how systems work, right? So not knowing what services are available, let alone actually being able to access those services. There's a lot of discrimination that happens, unfortunately, in our communities. And the immigrant community is already dealing with that stress and has always been, right? So this is something that we already know. That has an impact on their health. That has an impact on their social outcomes. Mm-hmm. Now, living in chronic stress, and not only the stress when we think about, a deadline or a car alarm going off, and that's when we get stressed. That is more acute. Right. What I just mentioned are more long-term permanent and consistent stress, which it turns to be chronic stress, right? So how do we address that? We look at what the causes of those stresses are, right? And we attempt to ameliorate that by either decreasing that stress or providing some protective factors, right? And we can talk about that, if you want.
Let me ask you a question, though. I mean, you're saying that you're looking at what are the causes of this stress. In today's world, I would suggest that in addition to the fact of being seen as an immigrant, being seen as a person of color in this country today is in and of itself stressful, because you're kind of, I mean, we're living in a world, I would suggest, where you don't know when you walk out of the front door whether you or your child or your spouse is going to be able to walk back into that door at the end of the day. Is that an overstatement on my part, would you say?
No, I absolutely agree with that. We're seeing that nationwide, right? There is the chronic stress that is being added to the experience I already mentioned, that we know immigrants experience, the immigrant community experience. So now, more than ever, we see that there's the fear of leaving their home, right? Taking children to school, going to a medical appointment, accessing services. There's an uncertainty that is creating this chronic stress, right, for communities who are immigrant communities. And that is only exacerbating the health impact, the social impact of those communities. And I think we know what the impact will be, because we do know what chronic stress causes. I think that we're yet to see the compounded impact of the current environment with all the other structural barriers that immigrant communities have to deal with.
What are some of the things that chronic stress can cause?
Sure. So we do know that there is a physical impact. So lack of sleep, right? There's even sometimes hormonal imbalance. There is a component of intergenerational transmission of the stress. So it's not only, say, the individual who experiences the stress, and then there's an impact on their biological body, but there's also a likelihood of them transmitting the stress consequences to their children.
The family, okay.
Yeah, and there's research now that can trace that, right? And there's a mental health impact. I think that we talked more about that, right? So anxiety, depression, even PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. But the physical impact, it's very well documented, and I don't think that we talk much about it, and how chronic stress is a social determinant of health.
You just said PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yes.
What is your thought as to the impact of you go to school and you can't get your child, or as you have your child, you and your child are being whisked away to you don't know by whom, and you don't know where, and from best I can tell, you don't have the opportunity to tell anybody where, partly because you don't know, partly because you're not told. Could that result in, is that an example of what could cause traumatic stress?
Absolutely. So there is this term, and it's called weathering effect, or weathering hypothesis that we know. I do a lot of research. That's my primary role. And in essence, the theory, right, postulates that prolonged exposure to discrimination or any social stressors, right, it accelerates the mental health impact and also physical impact of the stress. So in the case that you just provided, absolutely, the uncertainty, the exposure to discrimination, exposure to really it's that uncertainty of not knowing what's going to happen next.
I'm going to take a break from our conversation just for a moment, Iris, and just ask the M.E.S.H listener. I believe that today's conversation is meaningful. My attempt is that all of the M.E.S.H conversations are meaningful to you. So I'm going to ask you to subscribe to the M.E.S.H with Dr. Pamela Brewer YouTube channel. And there you will be able to see this conversation and all the conversations that we've had. You'll be able to play them whenever you like and share them as you wish. So again, I'm asking you to go to the M.E.S.H with Dr. Pamela Brewer YouTube channel. Let's return to our conversation with Iris. Iris, when let me back up a bit. Being an immigrant in this country, even if you are considered an American, nowadays, it almost kind of doesn't matter. Because again, and this is my perspective, from my perspective, it almost doesn't matter where you were born. It almost doesn't matter where you are, if you are quote unquote legal or illegal, if you are a person of color, particularly if you are from an immigrant community, you got a lot of stuff going on. You don't know what the next moment is going to bring, let alone what the next day is going to bring. And this may be too soon, but I'm wondering if any research has been done on the physical ailments that people are experiencing as a result of this. Is there an increase in depression or anxiety or heart disease? Is it too soon for that kind of research to begin?
From this current environment, yes, we don't have that yet. However, we do have the information from prior immigration enforcement, from prior political climates on the immigrant community, right, in this country, which I have to say, this is not the first time the immigrant community has experienced something like this. It's just very much exacerbated. We haven't experienced it to this level. So yes, the prior research has indicated, physical consequences, like I mentioned, disturbed sleep, but also weakened immune system, getting sick often, right? It's something as what we may think that the flu, right? Maybe a cold, but also not only for parents or adults, but also children. There's a cardiovascular strain. If we think about stress and how our system works, there is that connection, and it's very clear in research. And like I say, also a lot of hormonal dysregulation that happens, mostly for women, but we've seen that too. So yes, we know what is to come because of what research tells from the past. Now,
okay,
yeah, it is very likely to be even exacerbated because of the level the environmental stress right now.
For those who are listening now and unfortunately nodding their heads, they're like, yeah, I get it. I know the feeling. I'm feeling the feeling, but I'm afraid to go out and reach out for help. I'm afraid to go to the doctor. I don't know about my job. I don't know about what do you say to those folks?
Yeah, I mean, I first want to validate the feeling. It's real. It's real.
Yeah.
And it's we could go out and we don't know what will happen to us or our family, right? As being part of the immigrant community. But I also will say the immigrant community is very resilient, and there's a lot of strength that we, in times of crisis, we tend to forget. And I think that it's very important to remember that, right? Immigrant communities have already overcome so many struggles, so many difficulties. Mm-hmm. They're strategic, right? They bounce back, and I think that's what I will say. Think about your strength and plan accordingly. Say, for instance, if you have a friend who feels very comfortable, maybe have more privilege than you do, right? Maybe reaching out to that person, maybe go with them, reaching out to your informal networks, and that is something that we know the American community does very well. Actually, do more informal networking and service provision than formal, right? And so I think just remember you're strong. You're strong despite everything that's happening.
So it sounds like you're almost saying go back to your cultural roots, because your cultural roots for people of color, I would suggest, has always been an acknowledgement of family, whether it's family of birth or family by choice. There's always been an acknowledgement that gatherings of social, like-minded people is empowering. It is strengthening. It does help you to get through the next day, despite all the, I'm going to call it madness that we're dealing with nowadays.
Absolutely, yes. And we do know some of the protective factors I mentioned earlier. We do know that it's a sense of community, right?
Yes.
It's ethnic pride or racial pride. We do know that helps ameliorate some of the health consequences of stress. So even as providers, right, we want to make sure that we're somehow creating those spaces for our immigrant community. Yeah.
The sense of despair, the sense of hopelessness that many people of color, certainly people within the immigrant community, or people who look like they might be a part of the immigrant community, because nowadays that's a thing as well. For those folks, again, what I hear you saying is reach out to the resources that you actually already have. You already know somebody or someplace that feels like a safe place to you that you can connect with. A lot of times people say, well, what good is talking going to do? And I think what you're saying is that talking, being around similar, like-minded people, that's more than just talking. That's empowering and that's strengthening.
Absolutely. Yes. People with similar lived experiences, there's something about the shared experience and the connection that, as we know, a lot of immigrant communities, they tend to be isolated, right? Once they migrate and they have roots here, it takes a while to get that connection back, especially like I mentioned, there's a lot of structural barriers to that. So yes, just talking, sharing, it does have an impact. And we do know that sense of well-being, that's the impact that having the sense of community does, right? So, and that's what we're trying to do, right?
Okay.
Those are the things that we have control over it.
Right. Not a whole bunch, but at least we have that. And that actually can be quite empowering. For those who are listening who may want to get more information about the work that you're doing or the work that's being done at the University of Maryland School of Social Work, is there a website that you might guide folks to, or is that available?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I absolutely have my own personal website where I have all my projects. The Be Well Center. Now we also have a website which we list all different projects, and we're trying to disseminate that to the community as well. So I can share that with you.
That would be great. That would be great. What is that something that you can share with me now, or would you like to send that to me later and I can make it available?
Yeah, I can send that to you later. I have to look for the center website. I don't want to get it wrong.
Okay. You can give us your website.
Yes, it's iriscardenas.com.
Okay. And that is, spell that for us, because there are some folks who are hearing but not seeing.
Sure. So it's Iris, my first name, IRIS, Cardenas, CARDENAS.com.
Terrific. Thank you so much for joining us today and helping us to sort of wade through a critically important topic. And thank you for the work that you do and the research that I've seen that you've done in the past. And I know the research that you will continue to do. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It was my pleasure talking to you. And it's a very important topic. So Thank you.
we will continue to talk about it. Absolutely. And folks, I want to thank you for joining me today on this edition of M.E.S.H. I encourage you to sign on to the YouTube channel. M.E.S.H. with Dr. Pamela Brewer is the address, and there you can see this conversation and all the conversations that I've had. You can share these conversations. I encourage you to do that. I will be here next week, and I hope you are as well. You take care.